Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. The Parole Evidence Rule is a fundamental principle in contract law that prevents parties from introducing extrinsic evidence to add to, contradict, or modify the terms of a written contract. In simple terms, once an agreement is documented in writing, parties cannot later claim that there were additional verbal promises or terms not included in the contract. This rule ensures that the written agreement accurately reflects the terms agreed upon and protects against disputes arising from conflicting oral statements. The rationale behind the parole evidence rule is to provide certainty and finality in contracts. Without this rule, written agreements could be undermined by verbal claims, leading to uncertainty in business and personal dealings. It also prevents fraud and dishonesty, as one party might attempt to introduce fabricated oral promises to gain an unfair advantage. Additionally, the rule encourages careful contract drafting, ensuring that all terms are properly recorded to avoid future misunderstandings. In Singapore, the Parole Evidence Rule is codified under Sections 93 and 94 of the Evidence Act. Section 93 of the Evidence Act states that when the terms of a contract or any other document have been reduced to writing, no oral evidence can be introduced to contradict, vary, add to, or subtract from those terms. This means that once an agreement is formalized in writing, the court will generally only consider the terms within the document itself and will disregard any alleged oral agreements made before or during the signing. However, this rule is not absolute. Section 94 of the Evidence Act sets out several exceptions where extrinsic evidence may be admissible. One exception is where there is a separate oral agreement that does not contradict the written contract but relates to it. If an independent verbal agreement exists alongside the written contract, evidence of this may be allowed. Another exception applies when the contract contains ambiguous terms. In such cases, external evidence may be introduced to clarify the meaning of those ambiguous terms. Furthermore, if it can be shown that the written contract was not intended to be the final version of the contract, courts may consider evidence of prior discussions or agreements. Finally, if there is fraud, mistake, or misrepresentation in the formation of the contract, extrinsic evidence may be admitted to prove such claims of fraud, mistake, or misrepresentation and to prevent injustice. To help illustrate how the parole evidence rule works in real life, let's go through 3 practical scenarios where this rule applies and the impact it has in legal disputes. In the first scenario, imagine a landlord and a tenant sign a written tenancy agreement for a rental unit. The tenancy agreement clearly states that the monthly rent is $3,000, but it does not mention any discounts or additional benefits. However, before signing the tenancy agreement, the landlord verbally told the tenant that he would provide free Wi-Fi and waive the first month's rent. A few months later down the road, the landlord stops paying for Wi-Fi and chases the tenant to pay for the first month's rent. The tenant refused, claiming that the landlord had promised these benefits. The landlord disputes this, arguing that since these terms were not included in the written tenancy agreement, they do not apply. Under the parole evidence rule, the tenant cannot rely on the verbal agreement because it contradicts the terms of the written tenancy agreement, which does not mention free Wi-Fi or first month rent free. In the second scenario, a car buyer agrees to purchase a vehicle from a dealership. The contract for the sale of the car specifically states that the car is sold as is, with no warranty. After a few weeks, the buyer experiences engine trouble and demands a free repair, claiming that the salesperson verbally assured him that the car came with a 6-month warranty. Because the written sales contract explicitly states that the car is sold as is, the buyer is prevented from introducing evidence of the salesperson's verbal promise under the parole evidence rule. If the buyer wanted the 6-month warranty to be enforceable, it needed to be included in the written sales agreement for the car. This case highlights the importance of ensuring that all key promises and assurances are documented before signing the contract. In the third scenario, a company hires a consultant to provide marketing advisory services for 1 year. The written contract states that the consultant will be paid $10,000 per month. However, before signing the contract, the company verbally promised the consultant an additional performance bonus of $20,000 if the consultant achieves certain KPIs or targets. 6 months later, the consultant meets the KPI targets and requests the bonus, but the company refuses to pay, arguing that the contract only specifies a fixed monthly payment and makes no mention of a performance bonus. Under the Parole Evidence Rule, the consultant cannot enforce the verbal agreement unless he can prove that the contract was not intended to be a final and complete record of all the terms, or unless an exception under Section 94 of the Evidence Act applies. This example emphasizes why employees, consultants, and businesses should ensure that all financial incentives and performance-based rewards are explicitly recorded in writing to avoid disputes. These scenarios demonstrate how the Parole Evidence Rule operates to uphold the integrity of written contracts and why it is crucial for parties to ensure that all essential terms are included in their agreements. While there are exceptions, courts generally uphold the rule to prevent disputes arising from unverifiable verbal claims. While the Parole Evidence Rule plays an essential role in maintaining certainty in contracts, it is not without criticism. Some argue that the strict application of the Parole Evidence Rule can lead to unfair outcomes, especially when valid agreements are excluded simply because they were not recorded in writing. Others believe that courts should have greater flexibility in allowing extrinsic evidence in cases where it is clear that both parties intended certain terms to be part of the agreement but failed to document them properly. In practice, the rule serves as a safeguard, but parties entering into contracts should always ensure that all key terms are explicitly written to avoid disputes. Understanding the Parole Evidence Rule is crucial for anyone involved in contracts, whether in business or personal transactions. Ensuring that agreements are fully documented can prevent understandings and legal complications down the line. While exceptions exist, the best approach is to assume that if something is not in writing, it may not be enforceable. Thanks for joining me in today's discussion on the Parole Evidence Rule. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.